The interesting thing is that there's essentially, other than providing some of the ideas, faculty aren't involved, and it's about the managers together discussing. So that's quite different than the traditional business model role that we have in an MBA program.
Absolutely, absolutely. So people take responsibility for their own learning, do it in their own way, apply it in their own way, and find all kinds of ways to do it. So we've got Fujitsu doing it in Japan, and SAP's doing it in Germany, and we're having great fun.
So this is interesting because this is something which is developed here in Canada, but you see that it's globally applicable.
Yeah, it's the same material. They're translating it. We just got an email today that a Norwegian group wants to translate it into their own languages and promote it there. In Japan, it's all been translated into Japanese, and so on and so forth. These are fairly universal issues. In fact, some of them, like one on worldly versus global, is about comparing sort of a global stand with a worldly stand. And worldly means you understand other cultures. Global implies that everything is homogeneous. So that's perfectly applicable to all kinds of cultures, where they look at how narrow are we, how broad are we, do we understand other cultures, and so on.
One of the things that I've talked about is that there's 4 stages in a manager's career. One is from becoming a manager. Secondly is going from manager to leader. Third is going into a C-suite, an executive program position. But the fourth is going from being a corporate manager to an entrepreneur later in your career, perhaps in your 50s or 60s, after that long career has come to a different place. It's interesting that you're actually living out that 4th stage of going from being, in this case, a university professor, someone who runs programs, to where you're being an entrepreneur later in your career, later in life, in fact.
But bear in mind, too, that there are 4 of us as partners, and unlike typical entrepreneurs, I'm not going to. This is not going to become a full-time activity for me. I'm kind of aiding and working together, so I'm more like a partner. I'm absolutely involved, very committed, very kind of passionate about it, as I hope you can see. But I'm remaining with what I'm doing. But I suspect a lot of executives who become entrepreneurs don't become great big entrepreneurs. They don't, at age of 65, retire and found billion-dollar companies, although we'd love to be that. But they start small things that are comfortable with where they're at. So that's kind of where I'm at.
So something where you don't have the energy and the ambitions of a 25-year-old, nor should you. You've already worked for years. But the thought is you have a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, a lot of networks to bring to the table. And so it's something where you're not going to work at this for 30 years, most likely, hopefully optimistically, but it's something where you see that it's a shorter-term project and you're going to pass it on to someone soon. So it's not something where you're trying to create a business for yourself forever.
I don't have to pass it on to someone because Phil takes the lead and so on and so forth. So you know, if I disappear tomorrow, it keeps going. It's set up.
So it's a natural kind of progression.
Unlike most family businesses where you pass it from one generation to another, we're the opposite. We're the opposite. We start with the younger generation who brought in the older generation. I mean, I gave Phil advice as to how to get it, you know, how to get started with his own group, but Phil's the entrepreneur who kind of created it, and I'm sort of helping out and so on, and a partner and so on and so forth. So it's a bit different, but it's appropriate because Sasha and I are in an arranged marriage. I always joke about that, in the sense that we were introduced by our 2 respective daughters, who insisted we meet because they thought we should get together. So it follows that we should get into business through a son, because we met through daughters, and so the next generation is feeding into the previous generation.
You're a management thinker. And one of the questions, kind of the dogs should eat their own dog food sort of thing. I'm not sure that's the right expression. What's the expression I'm thinking of? But that you should enjoy and use your own product. Have you learned anything that made you rethink some of your own ideas in the midst of doing this over the last year or 2?
Well, I think the strongest thing is that every time we do a topic, you know, I've got the conceptual stuff down pat, so I can do topics quite quickly because very often I've been teaching that stuff for years, and so it's just a question of rendering it in a form that people can download it and do it by themselves. So you've got to add some text and all that to fill it out. The other side of it, though, is that these have to be very practical, applied kinds of things. So it's all right, that's a beautiful theory. Now, how do we get people to really run with it? And that's been the interesting part for me in a way, is to come up with ways of doing that. And Phil is an absolute genius at that. He takes conceptual material and he says, why don't we role play that? Or something, you know, that the silos and slabs, for example, he says, look, a great exercise in this would be to role play the opposite of your silo. So if you've got people in the group who are representing two silos, role play the opposite position and start to understand where the other guy's coming from or the other gal's coming from. So that kind of, Phil brings that kind of very practical but also very creative flair to exercises. And I bring a lot of thinking about concepts. And the other thing I bring, obviously, is that I know a lot of people who have developed a lot of conceptual material, like Karl Moore and others. Yeah. And so I can sort of attract them to come in and say, hey, do a topic for us. Today I spoke to 2 people about doing new topics for us.
One of the things is that, you know, when we write as academics, we often have a lot of footnotes and everything else. But in this, what you've got to do is get it down to the essence in a way that doesn't do violence to the idea, but gets it to the essence where experienced managers who are sophisticated people can do something useful with it.
Absolutely. So we're walking a line between making it clear and precise and sharp without making it trivial and easy. The thing we're trying to avoid absolutely is this 10 easy steps, here's the answer, here's an easy way to do things. We want people to be thoughtful and think about it, and then to apply it and think through the issues they're dealing with at work. And that's really...
But by doing it with practicing managers in context, the richness is in the difficulties and the saying, well, it works, but you've got to add this a little bit to make it work in our context, almost as a natural part of getting people to discuss it and really get into it then.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the way I describe this is it's the most natural thing in the world. I think managing is a very natural process. You know, we need leaders, we need people who are going to sort of guide and get groups working effectively. And this is the most natural form of management development. They don't have to come in, sit in a class, do a case about somebody else's experience, listen to a lecture. No, they download material, get some concepts, get some things stimulating the creative juices, and then they start saying, all right, how does this work for us?
So is this the end of the business school?
No, I don't think so. Not quite. Not quite. But I hope it's the beginning of something quite big and quite extraordinary.
Good. Thanks so much, Henry, and good luck on your new venture.